Don't touch him. The voice came from behind her like a blade clearing a sheath, quiet, controlled, and absolutely final. Amara froze, her hand still outstretched toward the small boy crouched in the corner of the marble hallway, rocking back and forth with his fist pressed against his ears. The slamming door was still echoing through the penthouse, still bouncing off $20 million worth of glass and cold air. She turned slowly. The man at the end of the hallway was not what she had prepared for. 6 feet 2 of barely contained danger. A charcoal suit worth more than her rent. Dark eyes holding the specific stillness of someone who stopped feeling things publicly a long time ago. But it was the tattoos that stopped her breath entirely. One button undone at his collar, just enough, and curling up from beneath the white fabric was the edge of an intricate black serpent, its scales so finely rendered it seemed to shift when he breathed. At his wrist, where the jacket rode up the tail of a dragon, ink so dark it looked burned in rather than drawn. And across his inner forearm, visible when he crossed his arms, a single word in plain English. Patience. She filed that away and looked him in the eyes. Kwon Jae-won looked at her the way men like him looked at everything, like he was deciding if it was worth his time. "You're the new one," he said. "Amara Ose." She kept her voice level. "Goldfinch Agency. I was told to report." "I know when you were told to report." He moved toward her, each step precise on the marble, and stopped close enough that she caught his scent. Cedar and cold rain and something that had no name. His eyes moved past her to the boy. Something crossed his face and was gone before she could catch it. He doesn't like to be touched without warning. He'll tell you himself when he's ready, which isn't often. Amara turned back to the boy. 7 years old, small, same sharp bone structure as his father, but softer coloring. She had seen one photograph of the mother in the agency file, a beautiful Korean socialite who had packed for Paris 3 weeks ago and had not taken her son. The boy's name was Kwon Seo-jun. He was autistic. He had driven away 4 housekeepers in 3 weeks. Seo-jun-ah. She lowered herself into a crouch. Eye level, no crowding, no reaching, just present. The way she had learned to be present with her youngest brother back in Accra before the world got complicated. "My name is Amara. I'm going to be here for a while. I just wanted to say hello." The rocking slowed, not by much, but by enough. Behind her, she heard Kwon Jae-won's breath catch, the most human sound she would hear from him for a long time. If you want to know what happens when a woman who doesn't flinch meets a man who has forgotten how to be soft, stay right here. This story is just getting started. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. The first week, she learned the rules of his world. Not Jae-won's world, but Seo-jun's. Because that was the one that mattered, and she understood this immediately. Seo-jun woke at 6:40 without fail. Breakfast had to be rice on the left, egg on the right, a precise half-inch of space between them. Barley tea exactly 3/4 full. Deviate by a centimeter, and the meal was over. She did not deviate. He didn't speak to her those first days. But he watched her constantly. Those precise dark eyes tracking her movements, with an intensity that felt less like suspicion and more like data collection. She was being studied. She let herself be studied. On day 3, she set a small aquarium on the living room windowsill. 3 fish, slow and predictable, patterned in their movements. She said nothing about it and walked away. On day 4, she left a set of magnetic geometric pieces on the floor near his blocks, said nothing, walked away again. On day 5, she found him at 5 in the morning, cross-legged in front of the pieces, a structure of such perfect symmetry, assembled in the dark that she stood in the doorway and could not move. The fish tank glowed blue. Seo-jun looked up at her and really looked, for the first time. "Hexagon," he said. She kept her expression soft and level. "That's right, hexagon. The fish swim in a pattern, oval, then figure 8, then oval again." He paused. "You woke up early." "Couldn't sleep." "Father says my brain doesn't know how to be quiet." Said without sadness, just a plain reported fact, the way you might report weather. Something broke open in her that she hadn't known was closed. She sat on the floor, not close, just reachable. "My brother was the same," she said. "He called it living inside a beehive." Seo-jun went still. "Does the beehive get quieter?" He's an engineer now, designs bridges. "Bridges are load-bearing," he said. "I like that. Things that bear weight." She went back to her room and breathed carefully for several minutes. That same, Evening, she heard Jaiwan come home late and stop outside Seo Jun's room. The pause of a man standing at a door he doesn't know how to open. Then footsteps to the living room. The soft sound of the fish tank filter. A man sitting with it alone in the dark. She did not go out, she did not sleep either. He was rarely home before 10. When he was, she felt it before she heard it. The air in the penthouse changed, grew alert, the silence stood up straighter. He moved through his own home like a man crossing ground he had never fully decided to trust. Always measuring exits, always calculating angles. The habit of wariness worn so deep it had become posture. The tattoos were more visible in the evenings. She had been cataloging them in pieces, against her better judgment. The serpent at his throat connected to a full sleeve of black and gray down his right arm. Korean tigers, chrysanthemums, a wave, and woven through all of it in fine brushstroke lettering. A line of Korean she couldn't read. His left arm held geometric shapes that resolved into faces if you looked long enough. She had looked long enough twice and stopped herself both times. And across his inner forearm, in plain English, one word: patience. She understood that word as a choice. A man who had decided that the thing he most needed was the thing he would most often forget, and had written himself a reminder where he could never miss it. He loved his son. That was plain underneath all the marble in the maintained distance. He simply had no idea how to make that love a thing Seo Jun could feel and use. It sat in him like something expensive stored behind a locked door, present and entirely inaccessible. She watched him stand at the living room doorway and watch his son with an expression she had come to understand was as close to tenderness as his face currently knew how to produce, and she thought, this is the problem. This is not a bad man who cannot love. This is a man who loves enormously and has been taught every wrong way to show it. She began leaving notes, not the instructions he left her. Those were about food and schedules and the careful logistics of Seo Jun's routines. Hers were different. Small observations left on the kitchen counter beside his coffee. He said load-bearing today. He means it as a compliment. Or, he's ready to try the pond if you want to take him. He won't ask you directly. He'll mention the ducks. She never signed them. She left them and went to bed, and in the morning they were gone, and he said nothing about them, and nothing changed visibly. And then 3 days later, she would notice him doing something differently with Seo Jun. Crouching instead of standing, asking a question instead of making a statement, waiting an extra beat before filling a silence, and she would understand that the notes had landed. He was learning. He was slow and private about it, and he would never say so out loud. But he was learning. Then one night, 3 weeks in, past midnight, she heard his voice from across the apartment. Low, speaking Korean. And then a name. Minji, the mother. She heard him say it twice, in a tone she had not yet heard from him, not the cold authority he used with his men, not the careful gentleness he practiced with Seo Jun. Something older, calcified, wounded around a wound that had never properly closed. Then, very quietly, in English, he asked about you today. A beat of silence. I know, I'm telling you anyway. He hung up. Footsteps in the corridor. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and they looked at each other, and neither of them pretended she hadn't heard. She's coming back to Seoul, he said. The fact placed between them like something requiring a response. Amara set down her mug. When? End of the month. His jaw was set. She's bringing someone, a man. The information landed. She watched what it cost him to say it with that perfect stillness. Does Seo Jun know she's coming? She's not yet. He needs to know today, she said, before she arrives. He needs to understand he has a choice, that someone is asking him. Jaewon was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're very direct. You said that on day 1. It keeps being true. She picked up her mug and left him standing in the kitchen. She felt his eyes on her back the entire length of the corridor. She did not look back. But that night, for the first time, she dreamed about the word on his wrist. The meeting she was not supposed to witness happened the following Thursday. She came back from the market early. Seo Jun had decided abruptly he did not want to be outside, and when Seo Jun decided something, there was no negotiation, and she walked through the front door into a hallway occupied by 4 men in good suits, with the posture of people accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves in their direction. Jaewon stood at the center. She felt the difference the moment she saw him. This was not the man who sat with the fish tank at midnight. This was not the man who stood at his son's doorway with want written all over his face. The voice he was using was level and absolute and made the air in the room behave differently. One of the men was pushing back, gesturing, his own voice rising, and Jae-won let him finish and then said something brief in Korean that made the man step back as if the ground had shifted. Then Jae-won's eyes found her. 1 second, just one, and she saw the seam, the place where both versions of him met, and he looked at her with something she could only call apology. Not for what she was seeing, for what it meant that it existed at all. She nodded once, a look that said, "I see you. All of it. I'm not running." Then she guided Seo-jun past the group toward his room. One of the men said something in Korean as she passed. She didn't need to speak the language. She understood the tone perfectly, the tone of a man cataloging a woman as a potential variable in someone else's equation. She kept walking. Spine straight. Face neutral. Behind her, Jae-won's voice, very quiet and very final, said something in response. The man did not speak again. Later, after they had gone, she was working on communication exercises with Seo-jun in the living room when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. An unknown Korean number. She let it ring. It rang again 20 minutes later, same number. She showed it to Jae-won when he came to the doorway. His expression did not change, but he took her phone, looked at the number, and said, "Don't answer calls from numbers you don't know, not here." "Who is it?" "Park Sung-ho. He came to the door last week when I wasn't home." He handed the phone back. He won't call again. The certainty in that last sentence, absolute and with no elaboration, told her everything she needed to know about how Jae-won handled problems in his world, and about what it meant that she had just become adjacent to one. Seo-jun looked up from his hexagons. "Father breathes differently when you're in the room," he said. Amara kept her voice even. "Does he?" "Yes, he breathes like he's allowed to." She looked at the phone in her hand. She thought about the man who had called twice. She thought about the word on Jae-won's wrist, and whether she was being reckless or brave, and whether at a certain point those two things become impossible to tell apart. The communication games began in week 4. Her name for the exercises she built from instinct and memory, and her brother's particular history with the world. They sat on the living room floor each evening, never at the table because the table was too formal and felt too much like being tested, and she would start a word chain and Seo-jun would follow its logic wherever it led. A way of teaching him that the world had patterns he could navigate, and that navigating them was not a performance but a right. On a Tuesday 3 weeks in, she said blue, and he said cold and then stopped himself. "No, both. Cold is 2 things. Snow is cold and quiet. Ice is cold and loud when it breaks." He frowned. "Most things are 2 things." "Are you 2 things?" she asked. He considered it. "I'm precise and also very loud inside." She pressed her lips together so she wouldn't smile too wide. "Me too." "Father is 2 things," he said. "The loud one outside, the quiet one here." He paused, looking at the fish tank. "I think the loud one is not real." He was still speaking when Amara heard it, a sound from the corridor outside the apartment. Not the elevator, the stairwell door, footsteps, then nothing. She kept her face completely neutral and watched the fish and counted to 15, and the footsteps did not return. Seo-jun looked at her. He was observant about everything, including changes in her attention. "What did you hear?" "Nothing important," she said. Then, because he deserved honesty, "Someone in the stairwell, probably a neighbor." He nodded and filed it the same way she did, calmly and without panic, into the column of things observed and not yet categorized. They were more similar than she had originally understood. The key turned in the front door. Jae-won appeared in the living room doorway in his suit, briefcase in hand. She watched him scan the room the way he always did, automatic, a habit so deep it had become posture. His eyes moved from Seo-jun to the fish tank to her. He read something in her face. "What happened?" he said. "Footsteps in the stairwell, stopped outside the floor." He set down his briefcase. Something shifted in his expression, precise and cold, the thing underneath the stillness. "How long ago?" 10 minutes. He took out his phone and sent a message. 30 seconds later, it vibrated with a response. Whatever it said moved across his face in a way she was getting better at translating. Not immediate danger, but something. "Building security found someone on the floor," he said. "They're handling it." Seo-jun looked between them with his scientist's attention. He had understood more of this exchange than she would have liked him to. "Was it about Father's work?" he asked. The directness of the question, delivered without fear and just as a data point requiring confirmation, hit both of them. Jaewon looked at his son for a moment and then crouched to eye level the way he had learned to do. "Probably," he said. "Not about you or Amara, about me. I'll make sure it doesn't come here again." Seo-jun absorbed this. Then, with the devastating transparency of a child who has not yet learned that some truths require permission. "Amara says most things are two things. I said, what two things you are." Something moved through Jaewon's face. He looked at her over his son's head. She held his gaze. "What did you say?" he asked Seo-jun. "The loud one outside, the quiet one here. I think the loud one is not real." He was silent for a long moment. Then he sat in the armchair across from his son, really sat, level and unhurried and present, and said, "What is the real one?" "The quiet one, the one that watches the fish. You watch them too." "Yes, Amara also, in the morning." He looked at her. "She told me." Jaewon's gaze found her. 37 seconds, he said quietly. "The middle one. I counted last week." 40, she said. "I timed it Tuesday." The silence that followed was not empty. It was warm and full of something that had been building without either of them quite naming it, and now it was in the room with all of them and there was no putting it back. Seo-jun looked between them with his complete attention. "You're both watching the same thing," he said. "Yes," they said, at the same moment. Seo-jun nodded as if a hypothesis had been confirmed. He went back to his hexagons. Jaewon looked at the fish. Amara looked at her hands. The stairwell was quiet. The city moved outside. The ice cracked, not broke. Cracked. Then came the week she almost left. It started on a Wednesday, quiet and ordinary. Jaewon was away on business, 2 days in Busan, and he had left a note on the kitchen counter with instructions. Formal as always, though she had noticed the handwriting had softened slightly over the months, the letters less angular, as if even his penmanship was learning something. She was in the living room with Seo-jun working through a new pattern exercise when the doorbell rang. A delivery. She signed for it without thinking. Her name on the clipboard, which was wrong, which meant someone had put it there specifically. She did not open the package in front of Seo-jun. She put it on the kitchen counter and finished the session and put him down for his afternoon quiet time, and then stood alone in the kitchen and opened it. A single photograph. Amara and Seo-jun at the market, taken from a distance 2 days ago. Her back was to the camera, but Seo-jun's face was visible. His serious profile, his precise attention trained on a display of fruit he was examining. No note. Just the photograph in a plain white envelope, her name in careful block letters. Someone had been watching her. Someone wanted her to know they had been watching. Someone wanted her to understand that she and the boy were visible. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then she went to her room, opened the wardrobe, pulled the suitcase out, and set it on the bed. And she sat next to it and looked at it and did not immediately do anything else. This was the moment, she understood, where the path divided. She could pack and call the agency and leave before Jaewon came back, write a professional note, give 2 weeks' notice or no notice at all, and walk out of this apartment back into a life that did not include photographs of her and a 7-year-old boy, taken by strangers with unknown intentions. She could do that. It was reasonable. It was arguably the correct decision. She picked up her phone and called her mother. When her mother answered and said, "Amara, I can hear it already. What happened?" She pressed her free hand over her mouth and did not speak for a full 10 seconds. "I think I need to come home," she said finally. Her mother said nothing immediately. This was not her nature. Her mother was a woman who filled silences with purpose, and the fact of the silence told Amara she understood the weight. Then she said, "Tell me." She told her everything. The photograph, the phone calls before, the man at the door. She told her about Seo-jun and his hexagons at 5 in the morning, about the fish tank glowing blue in the dark, about a small boy who said her name like a condition and meant it with his entire precise heart. She told her about Jaewon, the tattoos, the midnight kitchen, the word on his wrist, the man who stood at his son's doorway and couldn't open it, and was learning slowly and against his nature how to do it. She told her all of it. Her mother listened without interrupting once. When she finished, her mother asked, "Is the boy safe?" "Yes." "Are you safe?" She thought about it honestly, the way her mother had always required honesty to be delivered. All the way, no halfway. "I think so. I think he would do whatever it took to make sure of it." "Do you believe that?" A pause long enough to mean something. "Yes." Her mother exhaled. Then the question isn't whether to stay. The question is whether you can live with what staying costs, and whether you are staying because of the boy or because of the man. Which is it? Amara looked at the suitcase on the bed. She thought about Seo Jun's voice in the dark. Bridges are load-bearing. I like things that bear weight. She thought about Jae-won at the pond saying, I don't know, we could find out. To his son like it was the most natural gift in the world. She thought about patience on a wrist that could do terrible things and chose, daily, something else. Both. Stay. Don't let him take that for stay. Don't let him take that for granted. She unpacked. She called Jae-won. She told him about the photograph over the phone in the brief factual way she had learned he processed information best. No preamble, no softening, just the sequence of events. On the other end of the line, he was completely silent for 4 seconds, which she already understood was not indifference but the opposite. I'm coming back tonight, he said. You don't need to... Tonight, he said. He arrived at 11. She showed him the photograph. She watched something cold and precise move through his face, not anger the way ordinary men expressed it, but something more surgical, more deliberate. He looked at the photograph for a long moment. I'll deal with it. I know, she said. I'm not asking you to explain what that means. I'm asking you to understand what it cost me to still be here. He looked at her. Really looked. Complete and searching, the way Seo Jun had looked at her on day 5, prepared to receive whatever the looking found. I understand, he said quietly. I will not let it happen again. I know that too, she said. He put the photograph in his jacket pocket. He went to his study. He closed the door. Whatever happened on the other side of it that night, the unknown number stopped. Park Sung-ho was never mentioned again. She never asked how. She had made her choice with full knowledge of what the answer was. She could live with it. She had decided she could live with it, and once she decided something, she did not revisit the decision. She was, her mother had always said, exhaustingly certain once she made up her mind. The Sunday before Min-ji arrived, Jae-won took them to the park. Logistics, he said. Seo Jun had been asking about the pond. Continuity was better for transitions. She said, give me 10 minutes. It was late afternoon, the light doing something generous to the willow trees in the still water. Seo Jun walked between them, not touching but close enough that his shoulder occasionally brushed Amara's arm. A proximity he now chose deliberately, which she never took for granted. He told Jae-won the ducks had an apparent size-based hierarchy, but the smallest consistently accessed superior feeding positions near the south bank, disrupting his initial model. 3 more visits, he said, and I'll have enough data for the new one. Then we come 3 more times, Jae-won said. Simple, immediate. We. On the walk back, Seo Jun moved slightly ahead to examine something at the path's edge, and for 40 seconds it was just the two of them side by side in the late light. The distance between their hands collapsed from 6 inches to 3 to 1, and then Jae-won's knuckles brushed hers, and neither of them stopped walking, and neither of them pulled back. Just that. Just contact. The border between one thing and something else. He exhaled through his nose, long and controlled, like a man practicing patience at its outermost limit. Seo Jun looked back at them from the path ahead. He looked at their hands, not quite touching, not quite not, and then at his father's face. Good data collection day, he said. 3 more visits. 3 more, Jae-won confirmed. Seo Jun turned back to the path, satisfied, and said to no one. The small duck is probably the important one. The others just haven't figured it out yet. Neither of them answered. Friday arrived with Min-ji in it. Black car, cream coat, the composed elegance of a woman who had repackaged her guilt and wore it so well you had to look carefully to see the seam. She was still stunning, the kind of beautiful that had been designed for rooms exactly like this one. She moved through the penthouse entry with the ease of a woman returning to something she had built. The man behind her was tall and handsome and forgettable, in the specific way of men who exist adjacent to powerful women and derive their confidence from proximity. His hand touched her lower back, and Amara watched Jae-won's jaw set exactly once. Controlled, filed, unreachable. Seo Jun stood in the living room doorway. The moment stretched. Min-ji looked at her son, and Amara watched the look very carefully because this was the one Seo Jun would be reading and storing and returning to for years, and she needed to understand what it contained before he did. It was not cruelty. She had prepared herself for cruelty and found instead something more complicated, and in some ways harder to address. A woman who genuinely loved her child but found the specific reality of him. his precision, his silence, his refusal to perform emotion he did not feel, bewildering in a way she had never learned to sit with. Absence wearing love's expression. Seo Juna, come say hello to Mama. He did not move. He looked at his mother, at the man behind her, at Amara. Amara gave him the smallest nod. You're okay. I'm here. You decide. Hello, he said, polite, precise. Nothing offered that had not been specifically earned. Jae-won, standing at the room's edge, looked at his son with an expression she had never seen on him before. The specific expression of a father discovering that his child is stronger than either of them had known. Min-ji looked at Amara. The assessment was careful and total and not hostile, more complex than hostility. The look of a woman who knows she has lost something to someone and is trying to understand what and how. You're the housekeeper. Yes. She looked at the aquarium, at the magnetic pieces arranged with geometric precision on the floor, at the weighted blanket folded with military exactness on the couch, at the world that had organized itself in her absence, structured and calm, and evidence of a child who had been seen correctly. Something moved through her face that she could not entirely contain. You did this, she said. He did it, Amara said. I made room. Min-ji looked at Seo-jun again, at the way he stood, not anxious, not retreating, but rooted. The posture of a child who knows exactly who he is in this room. Something shifted in her face. Recognition of what she had missed, of what had been built while she was deciding whether to come back. She looked at Jae-won. An entire conversation passed between them in 5 seconds. Old damage, old choices, the weight of two people who had failed each other and their child, and had arrived at opposite ends of the wreckage and were learning to exist there without it burning everything down. Can we speak privately? She said. Of course, Jae-won said. They moved to his study. The door closed. The forgettable man found something on his phone. The fish tank hummed. Seo-jun appeared at Amara's side like a planet finding its orbit, quietly and without announcement. She looked at the fish tank, he said. Yes? She didn't ask about Euclid. No. He was quiet for a moment. I won't tell her about Euclid today. Maybe another time, if she asks. He looked up at Amara. Do you think she'll ask? She looked at him. This boy who had learned to make every word count, who offered nothing carelessly, who was now extending the possibility of a future question to a woman who had not yet earned the answer. The particular generosity of someone who has been hurt and has chosen, carefully and with full information, not to close the door. I think some people need time to learn what questions to ask, Amara said. The way you needed time to learn that talking to me was safe. He considered this. How much time? I don't know. But the willingness to wait and see, that's yours to give or keep. Both choices are right. He nodded and filed it. He stood beside her in companionable silence, and they both watched Euclid trace his figure eights in the blue lit water. From behind the study door came voices. Jae-won's, measured and factual. Min-ji's, rising slightly, then settling. Then a long silence with shape to it. Then Min-ji's voice, lower, carrying the specific cadence of an apology. Not a request for forgiveness, just an acknowledgement of a thing that could not be undone. He's breathing differently in there, Seo-jun said. How can you tell from out here? I can always tell. Before leaving, Min-ji found Amara alone in the hallway. Her companion was at the elevator. Jae-won was back in his study. Just the two of them, and Min-ji looked at her the way women look at each other when the performance is entirely over and there is nothing left to perform. Take care of him, said without explanation because they both understood she did not mean only Seo-jun. I know my job, Amara said. I don't think this is your job anymore. Min-ji paused. She looked at the closed study door with an expression that was too tired to be anything other than honest. I left because I couldn't be what this life required. I'm telling you that not to excuse it, but so you understand exactly what you're choosing. I understand what I'm choosing, Amara said. I chose it already. Min-ji looked at her for a long moment. Something settled in her face, a final thing quietly placed. Then choose it all the way, she said. He doesn't know how to be chosen halfway. None of them do. The boy needs someone who stays. So does the man, though he will never say it and you should not expect him to. She walked to the elevator. She did not look back. The doors closed and she was gone, and Amara stood in the hallway in the particular silence of a woman who has just been handed a baton by the person who dropped it and has decided to carry it. She went to the kitchen. She put the kettle on. She waited. She found Jae-won in the kitchen after midnight. A glass of water he wasn't drinking, staring at nothing the way a man stares at. Something very large that requires the right angle before it can be moved. She put on the kettle. She said nothing. She had learned that he talked when the thing had finished arranging itself, and that silence was a space to be kept rather than filled. She wants formal custody arrangements, he said eventually. Scheduled visits, her lawyer will contact mine. Is that what Seo-jun wants? He said he wants to visit her, not live with her. He paused. He said he needs Amara to still be here when he comes back. He used your name, like a condition. She wrapped her hands around her mug. In the kitchen's low light, just the range light and the blue glow of the fish tank, Jae-won looked stripped of everything extra. No suit, no assembled authority. Just the tattoos and the exhaustion and the word on his wrist. Just a man standing in his kitchen at midnight, learning what it felt like to have his son use someone's name as a condition and understanding, clearly and without flinching. That he had earned that. Jae-won, she said, first time. She had kept it formal for months, the professional distance maintained like a guardrail on a dangerous road. He looked at her the instant she said it, the specific look of a person whose actual name has been used by someone who has been carefully not using it. She left because of me, he said. Not Seo-jun, she left because of what I am, what this life is. He was used as the reason because it was easier than the true one. I know, she said. You've known for a while. Yes. He was quiet. The fish tank hummed. Seoul moved through its late hours outside the windows. I looked into Park Sung-ho after the photograph, he said. He was mapping your routines, yours and Seo-jun's, testing distances, understanding what you meant to this household. He held her gaze, completely level. I dealt with it, completely. But I need you to know, this is the environment. The photograph was not the last thing that will reach for you. It will be managed, but it will reach. She had thought about this, sitting with her unpacked suitcase. She had thought about it all the way down to its honest conclusion. I know what I chose, she said. I sat with the suitcase and I chose to stay. That is my answer to everything you just said. He was still for a long moment. Something moved through his face. Not relief exactly, but the thing relief becomes in a person who had already stopped expecting it. Something quieter and more permanent than relief. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate, every inch visible, giving her all the time in the world to decide otherwise. He stopped close, not touching, just close enough that the air between them was warm and carried the specific weight of everything they had been to each other over months of midnights and fish patterns, and a small boy between them who had said her name like a condition and meant it entirely. I don't know how to do this carefully enough, he said. I don't know how to make sure I don't. Look at what you've done with Seo-jun, she said. You learned an entirely new language for him. You learned to say, I don't know, and mean it as something worth giving. This is the same skill. It's different. It's more, she said, not different. He reached up and touched her face, just his fingers, the lightest possible question. The dragon tattoo at eye level. The word on his wrist between them like something they had both been practicing without ever naming it as practice. She turned her face into his hand. He exhaled, long and slow, the sound of a man setting down something he should have put down a long time ago. Your mother, he said after a moment. She laughed softly. Now? I want to know what I'm working toward. She looked at him. This man who kept patience on his wrist where he could always see it, who had researched weighted blanket pressure in grams to help his son sleep, who crouched at pond's edges to say, I don't know. To a 7-year-old like uncertainty was a gift, who had come back from Busan the same night she called him because she needed him to, and he simply understood that without it being explained. She'll look at you, Amara said, the way Seo-jun looks at everything, like she's deciding what category you belong in. How do I pass? You already know how. He was quiet. Then slowly, fully, for the first time in all the months she had known him, for what felt like the first time in considerably longer, he smiled. The real version, the quiet one Seo-jun had always insisted was there. You're terrifying, he said. Yes, she agreed. He took her hand. Deliberate, unhurried. The most final thing. The morning after, Seo-jun was at the fish tank before either of them came down. When Jae-won entered the living room and Seo-jun heard him, he turned and walked to his father, chose the distance, closed it without hesitation, stood before him with the confidence of a child who has learned that approaching is safe, and said without preamble, Father, Euclid completed 43 figure eights last night between 10 and 11. I counted. Jaewon crouched to his son's eye level. You were awake at 11? Yes, I was thinking. But the counting made it quieter. Jaewon placed his hand on his son's shoulder, carefully and visibly. Seo-jun did not step back. You're breathing right, he told his father. What does that mean? It means you're not holding it anymore. He glanced toward the kitchen where Amara was making breakfast and doing an exceptional job of pretending she couldn't hear. It started recently. Jaewon's eyes moved to the kitchen doorway. Amara looked down at the eggs. When he appeared behind her a minute later, he said simply, Thank you. He did the work, she said. Both of you. We had the right help. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, cedar and cold rain and everything they had built in this kitchen. Over months of midnights and morning fish watching and careful daily unannounced presence, the kind that doesn't declare itself, the kind that simply continues until it becomes the structure everything else rests on. Jaewon? Yes. Don't thank me. Just keep showing up. He was quiet for a moment. I know how to do that, he said. She turned and looked at him, the serpent, the dragon, the word on his wrist, the quiet version of him standing in the morning light, being exactly what she had known was there from the moment his breath caught in a marble hallway over a boy who was slowly learning to stop his rocking. I know you do, she said, and she did. She had known it since the first morning she found him sitting alone with the fish tank in the dark, a man practicing patience on himself long before she arrived to give him a reason. In the living room, Seo-jun was explaining to Euclid the mathematics of figure eights, how a loop that crosses itself is not a knot but a path, how it returns to where it started without ever truly repeating, because each pass carries the memory of the one before. His voice was steady and full and precise and entirely, completely his own. Outside, Seoul moved through its enormous, indifferent, beautiful life. The city that held its contradictions, brutal and tender, loud and secretly quiet in its private hours, the way Jaewon held his now. Not perfectly, but deliberately, consciously, and better each year than the last. Inside, in the kitchen that had become its own country, a man with patience tattooed on his wrist took the hand of a woman who had unpacked her suitcase and chosen to be load-bearing. Not finished, never finished. But standing on the weight of midnight conversations and 5 a.m. hexagons and small notes left beside a coffee cup, and one boy who had asked the right question first. Does the beehive get quieter? Yes. When the right people are in it, when the right things are built around it with patience and presence and the daily practice of showing up. When someone chooses to stay all the way, not halfway, not conditionally, not until it gets too complicated, all the way. The kind of thing that justifies every difficult, costly, luminous step it took to arrive at. The kind that holds, the kind worth every single step. If this story found something in you, the midnight kitchens, the fish patterns, the father who finally learned to breathe, subscribe and hit the bell right now. Every week we bring you love stories that don't flinch from the complicated. The next one is already waiting for you. Don't miss it.